Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. And as Carly said earlier on, before we went live, probably took a long time to say the caption of this live
Welcome to
stream.
Shifting from Grudge
Oh,
to Grit,
I
Grace,
see.
and
I need to go
Gratitude.
on
And as Carly
live
said
here.
earlier on, before we went live, which
I needed to mute Instagram because we were going live there too. So, welcome to those that are listening in from Instagram, on YouTube. It feels like I've got alter egos on either side here because it's showing up 3 times on my side. But thank you for joining us and welcome, Carly. I want to just read a little bit about what our topic is today. We don't always stick to the topic, we just flow in this conversation with our amazing guest. And really, the caption today was seeing the signs, how perspective, energy, and culture shape our journeys. And we started off saying, yes, Jamila, let's get Jamila in there. Jamila, welcome. I'm just reading the bio and then we will come back to you to say hello to everyone. Ever notice how the universe seems to whisper through signs, people, and unexpected moments? This week, our special guest, Karli Grove, invites us to look deeper at how synchronicities, human behavior, and cultural experiences can serve as guides for transformation. From the unseen energies that influence us to the stories and perspectives that shape our path. The conversation really is going to remind us that life is always speaking if we're willing to listen. A little bit about Carly. She's an organizational change consultant and founder of Kantency Consulting Ltd, which is a consulting practice grounded in ethnographic immersion. I look forward to learning more about that. And a purpose of shifting perspectives. After years of wearing multiple different hats to gain life experience in her small Canadian beautiful town of Alberta. She followed an inner call and left it all behind by buying one-way ticket to New Zealand. Thus, she commenced what would become a 500-day solo travel journey, exciting, that spanned continents and transformed her very being. She lived out of her car for a while picking kiwi fruit in New Zealand, backpacked across Southeast Asia, and returned home forever changed with the clarity and determination to finally launch the business she had dreamed of for 7 years. She doesn't view change as something to resist. Instead, for her, life flows. Her grit is fueled by the passion to navigate change through perspective. Her grace comes from deep rooted community values, and her gratitude grows from seeing life as a series of synchronicities and sacred nudges. Now, she helps others navigate changes through her core pillar values of context, communication, and collaboration. Welcome, Carly. Looking forward to the conversation today, and welcome, Jamila.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Anissa.
having me. Hi,
Yes, well,
Jamila.
hi, Carly. Hi, lovely to meet you. And Anissa, thank you so much for always accommodating. I know I'm always late, but it's unfortunately um, traffic in Joburg is just horrific. Um, I'm so excited for today's episode. It just sounds absolutely amazing, and your journey sounds like you took on this whole big new adventure with such bravery and courageousness that most of us would probably cower if we had to be confronted with it. And I think it's just so amazing, from travel to transformation and a 500-day solo journey. I can't wait to hear more about it. Tell us about how you got there, how you got through it, to the picking kiwi fruit and staying over in your car. It's an amazing story. You can't wait to hear more about it.
I'm so excited. It's sometimes hard to believe that it is my story, too. It sounds like a story that happens to other people, but I lived it.
Yeah. So what got you to that point, and what got you to the point to buying the ticket? and how did it turn out to be a 500-day solo trip?
The 500-day solo trip kind of started by accident. I'll work my way backwards with your questions.
Okay.
It started off kind of by accident. So I bought the one-way ticket, started traveling, and I had a habit of journaling. And I evolved the journaling habit for when I was traveling. And in order to be accountable and make sure that I journaled every day, I actually numbered my entries. So I would say, today is day 1, today is day 52, today is day 347. So I numbered the days. And then the trip ended at the point where I was in Southeast Asia, and I knew that my trip was starting to wrap up, and I went, I don't know when to come home. So I looked at the calendar and I looked up when day 500 was, because I thought that'd be a really fun number to end on. And it just happened to work with the situation and timing. And I went, how fun would that be to say that I traveled for 500 days on the nose? So that's kind of how traveling 500 days came to be, partly by accident, partly by a little bit of pre-planning with my journaling. How I ended up buying the one-way flight ticket was, like Anissa said, I was wearing multiple hats in my small town to try and gain life experience. But I realized that what I was doing in the small town had served its purpose. I wasn't going to grow anymore. So it was time to move. And I was thinking, okay, well, where do I move to? Do I move to a city further south of the same province that I'm in? Or do I move to the other side of the country? Well, if I'm going to get on a plane to come home, why not hop the pond? Why not go to somewhere like England? Well, if I'm going to move to England, I don't want to go where the weather is horrible. So let's go where the weather's a little bit better. And so one thing led to the next, and I just came across New Zealand and I went, that's where we're going. Kind of all rationale stopped at that point. Bought a one-way flight ticket, didn't really know what the plan was, but I knew that I had a 1-year working holiday visa and I was just going to go with the flow. So I get there, long story to get there, a lot of detours along the way, a lot of roadblocks that no one could have ever anticipated, such as a cyclone hitting the airport, and I had to detour through Hawaii on my way to New Zealand. It was kind of one of those detours where I wouldn't breathe and rest until my head was on that pillow in New Zealand, because there were just so many pivots. But got to New Zealand, didn't even really know much about New Zealand, hadn't really researched. I was really just going with the flow. And when I got there, I learned that it had a very big camper van lifestyle. So I ended up buying a car that had a bed in the back, because that's a thing that happens in New Zealand. A lot of the vehicles, camper vans, have beds. And so started traveling a little bit. It was time to make some money. So I'm looking up some kiwi fruit jobs. And the place that I ended up working for, they had accommodations provided for some of their staff. So if you had a vehicle that you could sleep in, you got to stay on one of the kiwi fruit orchards, park your car on the grass. They had a house on site that you could go and mingle with all the other coworkers and all the other travelers. And I did that for 2 months before continuing on my journey in New Zealand to the next destination.
Wow, what an adventure. I mean, like, most of us wouldn't dare to venture out into, within our own borders, but to just buy a one-way ticket, Anissa, and then to take it on as it comes, that requires a lot of courage, I would say, and a lot of trust within yourself, right? So well done to you.
Thank you.
And I wish that it was easier for most of us to do, because that just sounds like you living your life. You could have, like you said, chosen to move an hour either direction from where you were, but you looked at something much larger and bigger. And in that, you've created a whole new journey, a whole new story. And I'm sure that there's so many wonderful anecdotes and experiences that you can share with us. Anissa, I mean, I've done that, where I've traveled overseas, but I have had bookings and people that I know that I'm going to, but on the odd occasion, I would just hire a car and drive. And it turned out to be some of the best experiences that you've had, meeting some of the best people that you get to eventually know. So it's just amazing. Anissa, I don't know about you, but have you ever done something so off the handle and unplanned?
No, a little bit of a yes and a no. I'm hesitant there because I'd won a trip to Paris, which is a very different thing, and then I decided spontaneously, well, let's just hop on a train and go to
Oh,
Someone
Switzerland.
else.
So that's the only way there. So it's not as crazy and bold and courageous, but nonetheless, I had no idea where we were going to stay and ended up staying in the small town of Lucerne, which I needed to take multiple different modes of transport to get to. But it was fun. It was an exciting adventure for me. So I can relate. But I actually want to ask Carly, like, what was the driving force? What prompted you to want to now go? Was it not feeling inspired in your own hometown? Was it seeking inspiration outside of the city? What exactly was the motivation behind it?
That is an excellent question, and one that I'm not sure has a specific answer. It probably is a lot of little things combined over the years. When I was in university, I met all these amazing people from all over the world. The small town that I'm from, it's very small town. We're talking, my high school graduating class was 5 different towns combined for a total of 41 students. So it's very small. There's maybe 5 different towns in the area that I consider home, and they have populations of 1,000, 800, 300, 500 is kind of the size of the town. So growing up in a really, really small area, very white, very English, very multi-generation, there's not necessarily a lot of world diversity. And then moving to university, I saw all these people that spoke multiple languages, had been all over the place. And I went, wow, I kind of want to be one of those people. So that way back planted the seed of hopping the pond, as I called it. And then I think just it was some sort of pull of, we're bigger than the small town, bigger than maybe Canada. I love traveling. I love being curious and exploring and new experiences. And so it was just kind of a following of nudges and those intuitions and
Yeah.
going, no, this isn't it. No, not there. How about here? So
You
it's
know
not
what
a,
comes to mind is the book The Alchemist. Have you read it?
I have, but it's been a while and I unfortunately don't remember a lot of the details.
No, it's like he just went on this journey, right? And he wants to go and discover himself and the treasures outside of home, only to come back right back to home. And I mean, I'm giving the really condensed version here, but it was like I'm wondering if that like it's something similar to that. I don't know what you remember about The Alchemist, but it was quite an inspiring book. And in fact, I didn't read it once. I read it more than once, and it takes on a different meaning every single time you read it based on where you are in your life stage and how you've improved on your consciousness and evolved in that way. I don't know about you, Jamila. Would you share that sentiment on the book? Have you read the book? I can't remember if you've read it.
Yeah, no, I have. I have. And I think for me, what it is about is that you have to venture outside of what you're comfortable with in order for you to understand and come back home to who you are. So for me, that was the message, more so than coming back to your town or coming back to your place. But it's about you and your journey, and allowing yourself to have those experiences which are uncomfortable, because that's what we need to do with ourselves. We've got to keep on pushing ourselves in, whether it's with what we're learning, with the jobs that we're doing, with the people that we associate with, because all of these have a direct impact on who we are, and finding out and uncovering more about who we are so that we find that place of home within ourselves. So for me, that's what that's the lesson that I got out of it. But I think also in pushing yourselves to those limits, and I've also grew up in a very, very small town, and for me, I never ever felt like, I always felt like there was more. There was more that I needed to discover. There was more that I needed to learn. And I almost felt like I didn't fit quite right. Um, So my journey was calling me, and it was bigger than that. And I needed to learn more about what I was reading in the novels or watching on television. And the only way that you could do that and truly experience the authenticity of it is if you ventured out, if you were brave enough to do that. And I think that the universe just has a way of guiding you along when you have this sort of intention in mind.
And it's a
And
big
it's
growth journey too.
correct. And it doesn't seem as daunting as it sounds while you are experiencing it, because it
Yeah.
kind of feels like a natural flow.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it felt. Was when I came across New Zealand, it was just there was no rationale, there was no justifying, there was no thought process. It was just, that's where we're going. And I think too, a part of the nudge that I was following was coming from a small town with multiple generations of my family having grown up there. It's amazing to have had those core foundations of community, and everyone's your neighbor. You walk into the grocery store, you know at least 4 people at any given moment. But at the same time, there's that area where it's challenging to experiment and challenging to kind of explore who you are, because everyone has these preconceived notions about maybe who you are or what you did once upon a time or who your family is. And so it was also really tough to figure out who I was in my small town. I was working there, I was getting there. When I came back from university, that helped spark a little bit more independence. But then the traveling to the other side of the world just blew it exponentially out of proportion in a beautiful way, because you get to start fresh. You get to be whoever you want. And if you go to one little area in New Zealand that I was at, if I didn't like how I presented myself, I go, okay, well, I'm going to do something different at the next time, at the next town. So it's also just beautiful growth experience where I could experiment with myself, and I didn't have people coming up to me in the grocery store going, oh, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. You just had a little bit more exploration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can relate to you on that. And Anissa, for me, the experience living in a small town, there's all these preconceived perceptions and notions of how your life would unfold. And we've spoken about this before. You would go to school, you'd graduate from school, and then the natural progression is for you to go to university. And after university, if you haven't found, my mom used to always say this, if you haven't found a mate at university, you're going to be alone for the rest of your life, because you're supposed to meet all these new people and whatnot. So there's certain stages that are already expected of you. And for me, I traveled immediately after school as a Rotary exchange student, and I went to Australia. And for me, it was just this exciting opportunity, and that's all I thought about. I never thought about the practicality of living after, that whole year and what it was going to be like. But what was amazing about it is that I found that universality of human connection, irrespective of what type of lifestyle or culture you were brought up in. There was that universality. Is it something that you experienced as well? And for me, I say this to you because at the time when I left, it was the turning point for South Africa, because it was the end of apartheid. And so our lived experiences, especially towards other races in our community, was completely different to my experience of when I went to Australia. And everything was so different because you were just another human being. There were no roles and labels and expectations placed on you. And that's where I learned about the universality of human connection. I know that you haven't had that experience with the whole apartheid thing and whatnot, but in traveling to these new places and, having experiences that were outside of your culture, is this your experience, or was it anything different?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And that's one of the favorite parts of when I traveled, was noticing that there are these human universals that connect us together at the core, but then we're all products of our environment. We think that we're so special. We think we're so unique, but we're really just products of our environment.
Yeah.
I operate the way I do because I was raised in Canada. Someone raised in Australia has very different norms because they're products of their environment. And it's only when we go travel other places that we can kind of challenge what we've been taught and see, like you're saying, those common threads of humanity. People, I think, are default good. People default want to connect. If they're otherwise, it's their environments are training their thought processes to see things differently. But yeah, 100%, I think we're all the same at the core. There's just no one right way to be a human. We're all influenced by our environments and our backgrounds and our upbringings and our situations. I was talking to a friend the other day. Right now in Canada, in my part of Canada specifically, we are at the turn of a season. We are shifting from fall into winter. I think snow is supposed to be arriving any day now. And typically when snow comes, it starts to come with a vengeance. And I was talking to this particular friend about the stress of living in a cyclical environment. We have extreme winter. We have not quite an extreme summer, but we have a very distinct summer. We have a fall, we have a spring, and each of those have very short time frames. Winter, granted, is anywhere from 6 to 7 months, but still. Summer is a couple months. Fall normally lasts maybe a month and a half. But we're constantly stressed because we live in such a short, seasonal, and cyclical environment. And we don't necessarily realize how that influences our connection to other people. People panic and go, oh no, I have to get things done before Christmas, or I have to prep for summer, or I have to get my garden out, or I have to get my garden in, and just everything runs on a time frame, and a very condensed time frame, it seems, when you live in this cyclical, seasonal kind of society versus somewhere like Australia. I guess depends on the part of Australia. Not as extreme. I'm not sure about South Africa. I don't know if it's also seasonally influenced, if you experience those.
Yeah, I do want to come in there because it leads us into the segue, and it's that context intelligence around the different cultural norms, around the different seasons. In fact, we had a guest on not so long ago. Jamila, you couldn't make that, but he spoke about how the season definitely influences everything, how we connect, our biology, how we respond. And so it does play a role. I mean, I've got a professional acquaintance who struggles with winter, and it's called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, I think it's called, where he just really can't cope. He goes in a very depressed state. But when summer comes, he's back to re-energized, reconnected, and he's also a landscaper. So you can imagine he loves being one with nature. But I want to shift the conversation a little bit from the beautiful adventure to coming back to the core topic. How do you then see the signs of where life is meant to lead you around perspective, energy, and culture, and how that actually shapes our journey? Can you talk to us more about that?
Yeah. I don't know if it'll necessarily touch on the culture part, but the way that I see signs is often actually very literal. There are a lot of things that kind of come into my path that I see as synchronous, as signs from the universe. For example, when I was traveling New Zealand, I said that my initial flight to Auckland got detoured, or I had to detour, and I ended up detouring through Hawaii. And so I detoured through Hawaii, ended up in New Zealand, and when I was picking kiwi fruit, I drive up to the orchard that is about to be my home for the next 2 months, and all of the orchards are named. They all have different names. And so when I drive up to this orchard, would you believe that the name of my orchard that is about to be my home for 2 months is called Hawaii Orchard? What? There's a sign. That's crazy. And then I fast forward. After I picked kiwi fruits, I moved to Christchurch, and I lived in Christchurch for a little bit, and I ended up working an insurance job. Well, for context, one of the roles that I had when I was here in Canada before I left was also an insurance role. I worked and I did home and auto insurance for a company in a town called Sedgwick. And so when I'm in New Zealand, I'm now working in an insurance role, and it was different. It was a claims type of position though. But would you believe that the name of the company was called Sedgwick? And I went, so I just left Sedgwick doing insurance to now be working for a company called Sedgwick doing insurance. Okay, that's an interesting sign. You can't make that up. And then on top of that, the reason I had to detour to Hawaii was because a cyclone hit Auckland and caused a bunch of mass flooding. So I detoured to Hawaii. The type of claims that I was handling for this company called insurance were handling natural disasters, specifically the claims from that exact incident that prevented me from entering the country. So just a lot of times as I'm traveling, I'm coming across all these those are the big synchronicities. Those are the big signs of you can't make this up and we're on the right track and we're doing the right things, because it's just so uncanny for it to not be meant to be. And then there's lots of little things along the way too, of certain people that you meet or experiences that you've had or things like that. Is just amazing to go with the flow of literally what kind of signs are put in front of you.
I think, and you have to be open and aware to it, right? But in this fast-paced world that we're living on, we most of the time on this hamster wheel, and you can't even remember which day of the week it is. How do you suggest that people learn to stop and pause and listen, to the environment, so that you can become in tune to receiving these signs and these, getting onto that same wavelength of those energies and synchronicities?
Yeah, it's a great question. And later on, I might change my answer to this when I listen to the video back. But right now, I think we are so stressed looking forward. We live in a society of exponential change, and we're all so focused on what the future is going to be that we forget to sometimes look at the past. So I can only speak on my personal experience, which journaling really helped. Journaling things down, making notes, and looking back at past patterns has really helped, of noticing the butterfly effect of, okay, I am sitting right here on a live call with you two beautiful women because I failed a chemistry quiz in my first semester of university. And I can kind of pinpoint all the divine detours, all the divine shifts by looking back and actually having gratitude for those, that it's not a failure. It wasn't a failed chemistry quiz. It was a pivot. And having gratitude for that makes me go, oh, well, what other kind of pivots and opportunities can perceived failures actually provide? So it's kind of being able to look back and have gratitude, as we will with the podcast, of how some of those moments actually were really good things. And when you see enough patterns of pivots that in the moment were really scary but became really beautiful, you have no other choice but to see all pivots as beautiful detours. So I don't know if that necessarily helps with other people of how they can help see the signs. Journaling's really good. And maybe a form of journaling is to go back and maybe write a timeline of your life and go, okay, this happened. Oh, but because this happened, it allowed this to come in. Oh, interesting. That wouldn't have come if it weren't for this detour. Okay, interesting. So maybe a little timeline exercise.
I love that. I love how you reframe that fear as something, or failure as a pivot. And most people don't see it that way, because like you say also, we become so conditioned to believe that this is how your life has to unfold and unpack, so that if anything other than that perceived notion of your life path happens, you look at it as a failure instead of a pivot, pushing you in the direction that you meant to be flowing towards. So I love that. And also agree with you 100% on the journaling, because with the journaling, what it allows, they always say hindsight is, 2020, it's the perfect sight. And that's what journaling allows you to do, because you can go back and you can read, and then you can justify that this moment actually wasn't a failure, but it was the reason resetting the path. A lot of people, someone said this to me, is that when you use your GPS and it takes you off course, it doesn't just cancel your whole trip because you've gone a wrong way or whatever. What happens is that you reroute. And in life, that's the same thing that happens, is your experiences and your failures allow you to reroute in the direction that you are meant to be going in.
Yeah. I have that sometimes on a smaller scale too. With when I'm driving, I like to notice repeating numbers. So sometimes if there is literally a detour on the GPS where I go, oh, I meant to turn off there, but I didn't. On my little detour, I'll come across 2 license plates that have triple digits on it. And I'll go, oh, okay, no, we're good. No stress.
Yes, absolutely. And like on that, driving metaphor, when I first got to Johannesburg, I mean, I lived in Durban, and prior to that, I lived in a very small town. So coming to Joburg was like, I think it was more or less the same scale of going to New York. That's from like, I was filled with so much intimidation and intrepidation and whatnot, especially to be driving around in the city. Because you hear a lot of horror stories, and if you take a wrong route, you're doomed, literally. And my first job was as a sales rep for a media company. So I had to go out and actually go and visit with my clients who were all around Johannesburg. And at that time, we had no GPS. I literally had a map book, and I used to plan my my trip the night before. And obviously you can't be looking at your map while you're driving and whatnot. And a lot of times I went the wrong way, and immediately I was filled with so much of fear, and it just ruined my day and whatnot. But in doing, I got lost a lot. And later on, I think I know Joburg better than most people do, most taxi drivers do, Anissa. But it was all those experiences which at the time filled me with fear that gave me the greatest knowledge and understanding of a space that I needed to be in, because later on I had to deal with a lot of people in a lot of different places within Johannesburg. And it gave me ease, it gave me a lot of business. And so there's always good that comes out of something or some experience that you feel initially as being completely fearful and filled with failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Curious, we're kind of taking over the conversation. I wonder if Anissa has.
Do you know what? I'm listening with intent here because I'm having some connectivity issues. So I'm glad you're still having the conversation. I hope you're not noticing that my signal is coming in and out. Have I been there all along?
Yes.
Well, I've just got a notification that my mobile data's run out because I'm toggling between the Wi-Fi and the data. But let's hope the Wi-Fi doesn't throw me off course. And maybe it's also the redirection, since we're talking about redirection. But what I want to share is an experience this week, in fact, today, where I received news of an opportunity that's not going to proceed. And one can really wonder in that moment, like, I could have done this differently. I should have said this. I should have responded that way. But actually, it is every rejection or perceived rejection is, like you said, it's a redirection, it's a pivot. And so I told her before we went live, Jamila, that every time we have these conversations, it's like it's divinely orchestrated in the moment, in the right time, that everything happens for a reason and in the way that it's supposed to unfold. So that's what I've taken so far out of the conversation, is that the signs may not be evident immediately, but we need to actually ask ourselves, what was it trying to teach us? And why did we end up going a different direction, in that if the GPS said reroute? I don't like sometimes listening to the GPS. I don't know about you ladies, but when it sometimes says, here's a quicker route to your destination, sometimes that quicker route is filled with quite a bit of difficulty and roadblocks, and it's not necessarily the best areas. So I'm almost wanting to ask different question. So if the signs are there, do we always take the signs and accept it? Or sometimes do we need to go with our intuition and ignore that particular sign that seems to be like, hey, you need to pivot here or actually take a different route? So I know that it's flipping this concept on its head, but I'm just intrigued to figure out what you'd respond to it.
I like that question. And I would say that there's a podcast that I listened to a couple years ago, and they talk about neuroplasticity and manifestation and how when you're trying to manifest something, there's going to be tests that come up. And they're going to be things that are super shiny. They're going to be things that fill your list 90%, but it's a test because are you going to settle for this 90% or are you going to say thank you next and wait for the thing that's 100% waiting for you? So when you're talking, I was thinking about how sometimes if it seems like a sign, could it actually be a test? Is it a challenge to say, hey, we have this really shiny toy that you used to say yes to? Are you going to say yes to it again? Or are you going to acknowledge and wait for the next big thing that we have planned for you?
Oh my word, that is like so spot on. And again, it's like you're talking to me right now because before I moved forward with pursuing the opportunity, I was like, okay, what is this? What exactly am I doing here? Am I doing this because it did tick so many boxes and it was kind of shiny as you so beautifully described it? But what does it mean that I'm settling for? And in fact, it was an opportunity that wasn't even what I'm currently worth. So, so it is kind of that message. And that's why I asked that question, because in this very moment, it was like, but it's 99% got my name on it. And I could definitely make this happen, I could bring value to it, but it wasn't necessarily giving me the value that I know that I'm deserving of. So what exactly was I doing there? Am I searching for certainty again in the moment? Because that would have given me some more certainty in that moment. So maybe it is about pursuing the adventure of the uncertainty and seeing what unfolds in the journey, and just being more in tune with the signs that are saying, well, it's shiny, but maybe it shouldn't be this shiny. Maybe it should just be something that is leaving a big question mark. I know I'm being very cryptic, but you've been like, anything you want to say there?
I think also we need to get over those feelings of being irresponsible when we make different changes or changes that seem out of the ordinary for us, because we can feel, we have the intuition to know that this is what I should be doing because it's good for me, but other people's perceptions might not be the same. And this, you might feel, was your experience, especially in a small town where you dared to dream bigger than anybody else, where you were okay with taking on that irresponsible, adventurous part of you and making bold decisions to do something so completely different and out of the ordinary than that people were used to. So I feel for me, and this I had in my experience also, I had this perfect job at a corporate where I could have continued for the rest of my life, and I would have known that every month then I'd be fine and I'd be receiving commissions and I'd have a pension and all that. So from a textbook perspective, it was the safe thing to do, it was the responsible thing to do. And then an opportunity came my way where I could have been free and there wouldn't have been any restrictive parameters around my role. I would have been growing into new areas, things that I would never have even thought of doing. But it looked like I was being irresponsible. It looked like I was being too spontaneous in doing so. But I made the decision nonetheless based on my intuition, and it was the best decision that I could have ever made for myself. So I think that's something that we need to get over, is that we're doing something irresponsible by, ruffling up certain feathers. And also just to trust your own intuition and know that you are the only person who knows best what's best for you.
Or it's an experiment, or you're doing it and you need to make a mistake. You're
And-
supposed to go and learn things. You learn things the hard way because then they stick a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this brings me to my 18-year-old who actually says he's doing an internship at a local restaurant called Kauai. It's a health and wellness type of offering. They are actually also in Hawaii, believe it or not. And they're also in Dubai. The Hawaii's, Dubai, it's all rhyming. But what he said to me like 2 weeks ago, he said, Mom, I don't need to be in this matrix of 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. That is a lot of bullshit, he said. He's 18. And I was like, wow, okay. And I agreed with him. I said, but I don't disagree. I think this is a matrix and a system that we've been conditioned to believe we need to fit into or be in this mold of. But then I asked him, like, okay, so what's next? And it's only because he's streaming TikTok. And these kids are of a newer generation, right? And he's earning additional income there. In fact, he can make his month salary in one stream. So you can imagine where his brain is going. And then his peers are also generating, so much from it that they've bought homes and cars and they're not even 30.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So
love
I think
I love that about this generation, Anissa, is that they're so
I love
bold and
it.
this, and are not restricted with what they can and cannot achieve. And you see this in corporates, and you see that different mindset, and it causes a lot of conflict, especially with the older generation who are now at more senior levels, and they're used to a prescribed way of working. And then you have these newly graduated young 20-year-olds who don't see the value of coming in for an 8 to 5 job, but they think and work smarter and capitalize on a full day in doing so many different things. And it's difficult for you to get those two to meet to a meeting of the minds, because you have that older generation who feel that, okay, if you're not working from 8 to 5, you're lazy, right? Or you're not doing things in a prescribed way that we have been doing for decades. So I think it needs a lot of open-mindedness. It needs a lot of acceptance of new ways and new pathways. And also the thing is, like, and I've said this to my son, because there's a few things that I've like tried to encourage him to do, and he was like, but Mom, what if it doesn't work? If it doesn't work, it's not meant to work, but it's meant to teach you certain lessons so that you can get on to do the things that are meant to work for you. So I think it has to do with your mindset and having an open mind in the way that the world works these days, and also just giving our younger generation the confidence. And also sometimes you sit in awe of them because it's so amazing the way that they think, and just not to be a slave to the dogma of how your life is meant to work out. You can they would do anything at any stage of their lives, and that's how it should be, right?
We were talking at the beginning about how we're products of our environments and cultures. And I wonder if sometimes people forget that generations themselves are also a form of culture. They're products of their society, they're products of their peers, they're products of their previous generations of what they were raised. So the older generation, they didn't have necessarily the worldly changes that the younger generation has. They still went through a lot of change, which I think we sometimes forget to give credit to the older generation, that they went from no running water to Wi-Fi. Like, that's an incredible jump in one generation. But then even to kind of give grace to each generation for the grit that they experienced through their upbringings, was what kind of grit did the older generation have to experience? And their experience, they're speaking from their lessons learned from their lifetime of here's what I've noticed works. And if this was tried and true during my generation, I don't know how to see other ways. So it's just scary for me to see what the younger generation is doing. Versus the younger generation, nothing's guaranteed. In a short time frame, things turn on a dime every 5 years, it seems. So they don't know what it's like to have a tried and true method. So they just go and experiment. And so sometimes too, the different cultures within generations, sometimes we seem to forget, and we forget to give grace to the experiences that they each are bringing to the table.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're saying there, because within each of those environments or generational times that they were living in, they were actually experiencing based on their lens, as you rightfully say, but they were beautiful lessons that they imparted with us. So there was wisdom in it. It's up to us now to say to our kids, because the only thing I responded to him was, okay, so what happens if Trump decides he wants to close off every social media platform? So let's say TikTok is closed. What's the contingency? Right, which leads me to my next question with you, Karli. We wrote in something about sacred nudges. Now, let's say we, as in the hero's journey, we heed the call to adventure. That's the sacred nudge, right? But even that sacred nudge may not have been translated into the right thing for you in the end. What happens then? And have you had a specific one where it was a sacred nudge and you went with it, you believed wholeheartedly in it, that in the end, it served you to a certain point, but you still had to pivot, no matter how sacred that nudge was?
Oh, that's a great question. My brain always has trouble recalling the past, which is ironic considering that I'm very hyper aware of past patterns and stuff, but that's where my journals come in. To pull off the top of my head, sometimes I have to think. Have I had any moments where I've pivoted, followed a nudge, and it hasn't quite worked out? There probably has been, but I'm not able to pull them because I don't necessarily see it as something notable for the lack of what it provided. I always just kind of see the big picture of where it took. And I'll probably, once this live stream's over, I'll go, oh, that would have been a great example. So they probably exist. They're just not coming up.
Yeah, I ask those questions, Karli, because there are always people that are going to be skeptic. So I'm trying to think about our audience that may not believe in sacred nudges or have tried it and then it didn't work out. And then they potentially say, well, this is actually just woo-woo and BS, right?
Well, it's almost similar to your example earlier about the test, though. That was a sacred nudge that you could argue that was a sacred nudge, that you followed that lead for as long as you did, and then realized that, wait, it's not actually providing everything that I need. So then it caused you to pivot because you were really excited at first, but then some sort of doubt creeped into your mind. And sometimes that's a moment where we have to go, okay, is this doubt coming up because it's fear trying to prevent me from saying yes to this really exciting new thing? Or is it some sort of sacred nudge intuition saying this isn't for you? So sometimes it's really challenging because they sound the exact same when they're in our mind. Is it fear? Is it a nudge? We don't really know. I sometimes do this thing. I've done it for many years. I call it my, forgive my French, the fuck it test. And so if I'm sitting with an option where I'm like, okay, do I do this or do I do A or do I do B? I'll sit with it and I'll say, okay, fuck it. We're going to go with A. How does that feel?
Yes.
Okay, fuck it. We're going to go with B. How does that feel? And I kind of pretend that I make a decision each way and I see which way my body feels. Do I feel ick or do I feel excited or do I feel neutral or do I have more questions about one? So sometimes I put decisions through the test to figure out, is this a nudge pulling me one way or another way, or how do I want to navigate this one?
I love that.
Okay.
I love that when you use that one in future. I mean, we've used body testing, Anissa. I'm sure you've done it also before, just to see like how's that energy sitting within you. But I much prefer to say, fuck it. Let's go with that. Sounds so much better.
sometimes people, when they say fuck it, that's a really good thing because they say, fuck it, I'm excited, let's do it. That kind of came up for me because I noticed I was pretty young at the time. I think I was fresh out of high school. And I noticed that there was a pattern in myself that every time I said fuck it to something, it did not go the way that I wanted it to. It was something that I should not have done. Saying fuck it to me was a cue to not have done the thing. But to some people, if they say fuck it, they go, I'm so excited, let's go. So sometimes it depends too what it means to you, which makes it extra fun. Is it a fuck it, let's do it? Or is it a fuck it, let's not?
I love that. Karli, also like with your consulting practice, it seems built around context, communication, and collaboration, right? Why do you think these are the missing ingredients, so to speak, in most organizational change?
It's kind of what we were saying before about the depth of humans, that humans are all the same at the core. They just take on all sorts of different ways on the surface of looking. And I think when it comes to change, we get so caught up in the surface of what the change looks like with our eyes or what it feels like with our fingers or how we navigate through a physical space. We get so caught up in the material aspects of change because it's on the surface, which is kind of what I call collaboration. Collaboration is on the top. I have this upside down triangle that I put those 3 pillars into. Yeah. So collaboration's on the top, and it's the surface level of what we see, and it typically indicates that we need a change and that something a little bit deeper needs to be addressed. So that's often where communication comes in, where we're now starting to communicate with one another to figure out what is needed and what's not working and which direction do we want to go and how do we communicate to try and work better as a collaborative team on the top. But then the trouble is that, especially when it comes to things like change, we get so caught up in communication and there's too many opportunities for miscommunication that change starts to just go haywire or go sideways or something gets missed. And so we get stuck in this loop of communication and collaboration because if we're not communicating, then it changes how we collaborate. And if we're not collaborating, then it changes how we communicate and we get stuck in that cycle. And so context in this for my company is that deep root. It's at the very bottom of the triangle to say that this is the root of what's going on. This is actually not that complicated, just like humans are all the same at the core. When we're navigating change, there's these core things that are influencing the process. Are we scared of rejection? Are we scared of failure? Is there a sense of safety being threatened? What are these core human universals that we're trying to avoid or trying to achieve through change? And how can we all get on the same page of what's happening at the core of change in order to help the surface level? The surface level is never going to fully be, I don't want to say solved because that seems too finite, but the premise of solved. How can we work best as people collaboratively on the surface if we're not understanding the same root cause together? So I find that with change, that's a lot of areas of resistance that come up is when we're not all at the same page because people also get so caught up in the day-to-day that they can't look back and see the patterns of, oh, actually, this has happened before. Or, hey, we forgot that this was the detour that we wanted to take, but we got caught up with the shiny thing in front of us that we've now gotten distracted. But we forgot about the shiny thing because the shiny thing was so small. It's like that. I sometimes think of the fable, the story of all the mattresses with the princess on the top and there's that pea on the bottom. And that one little pea makes her feel really uncomfortable. But there's been so many layers removed that she forgets that it's the little pea causing all the discomfort. And sometimes that happens in organizations when they're navigating change. There's so many different layers that have distracted them that they forget that it's all because of this one little thing at the bottom. So to get to the core of it is the goal of helping to make change a little bit easier to navigate.
Yeah, I like that. I think the context for me in your values or core pillar values is really understanding the system. So it's taking that root cause analysis, systems thinking approach, where the collaboration is the human-centered design approach. So it's really looking at the human-centricness of communication and collaboration can actually take on both those forms. So I'm an advocate for saying that we do need to understand the systems that underpin how we respond to our environments, or to change, or to our relationships, or to just about anything, right? Because it's often, like you say, I always tell my client, it's the iceberg, that we don't see what's beneath the surface. It's making the unconscious conscious, because we've just become so, what's the word? Blind. It's kind of, we don't realize we're doing it, but we act out in a certain way because it's habitual, or it's an adaptation that is just so natural that we don't. It's a blind spot, if I
Yeah.
think about it.
I call it tunnel
And
vision. We get caught up in
yeah,
what's right in front of us.
yes, yes, exactly. So I love it because it's quite simplistic the way you're saying it helps navigate change, because it brings to the surface what are those things that are causing friction. Is it communication? Is it collaboration? Is it the relationship factors? Or is it actually just past experiences that are resurfacing and playing out in that environment? So it's very
And there's a
powerful.
lot
It's a
of,
good way to remember.
thank you. There's a lot of invisible influences that people seem to forget too, of how they navigate change. We were talking at the beginning about how Canada is very seasonal and cyclical, and Australia has very different norms than South Africa coming out of apartheid. So there's also all these invisible influences that we don't really realize when we're navigating change. Halloween just finished, and I was telling friends that, like, it's normal to go knock on someone's door on October 31st. But if you come from a culture that has never done that before, that's weird. So there's also all these assumptions that are made, especially within organizations, that they kind of don't know why they are doing something. That's just how we've always done it. And so for someone to come in from the outside, from a change lens, and go, okay, well, why are you doing that? On the surface, you're doing this action, but let's dive deeper into the root of it to figure out, what is this actually serving, and is there a different way we can still address the same problem, but with a better solution?
Jamila, do you want to ask a closing out question, or just an observation or an experience you want to share before we give Karli the final last word?
Yeah, I just wanted, I mean, you've worn so many hats in your lifetime so far. You've been the traveler, you've been entrepreneur, you've been a consultant, a student of humanity. What part of your identity feels most true to who you are at this specific time right now?
I still love the traveler. The traveler still has a very deep part in my heart, which is actually the reason I came home to become an entrepreneur and build this business, is to sustain a lifestyle of traveling in the future, in the long term. So definitely the traveler at the core is so relevant, and I think she'll be a very strong part of the identity for a long time going forward. Just the curiosity and the exploration and the learning and the patterns and the just love that you get to give when you get to experience other parts of the world is just unparalleled. So definitely the traveler. Great question. That's an amazing question.
It's a beautiful question.
And Anissa, like Karli's story is such a mirror of what this show stands for, right? The
Exactly.
courage to see beyond what's visible, to trust in the unseen, and to allow life to guide you rather than to fight it. So it's just been so incredibly amazing to have you on, because it feels like such a perfect fit in everything that you're saying and everything that we've tried to accomplish with this podcast. So it's just been really such a pleasure having you on and listening to your story.
Refreshing.
Thank you.
Refreshing
Thank
is
you.
the word. Karli, is there anything you would like to say in closure? And then when we normally end the live, we do a short debrief. So anything that you want to leave our audience that's burning for you, that you want to share with them?
Oh, it's like when you're having the last words. And they're like, any last words? And you go, and then people say things that are absolutely silly as last words. That's what it feels. I don't think so. I think this has been a beautiful, I love how it all intertwines too. The stories that we went on over this little coffee chat, they just all intertwine, which also is in and of itself symbolic of the journey to go through with grit, grace, and gratitude. Is just finding the patterns and the overlaps, and things always interweave. Everything weaves together, might be my final words. We're not on a linear path. Time gives us the illusion that we are linear, but everything is just woven together.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. For those that have watched on Instagram, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi connection threw us out, so I can't see your comments there. But thank you for joining us there. I do see some on YouTube, and those that are here on LinkedIn. It's been a bit quiet. Our regulars haven't showed up, but I also believe that whoever's supposed to be here will be. And for those that are going to watch the replay, I mean, Karli, where can they reach you if they do want to connect with you?
Yeah, Instagram and LinkedIn would be the best places. So Kantency Consulting for both of them.
Fantastic. So stay with us and
In
we'll
the
see.
chat, sorry, before we do end the live, can we just add that on into the chat?
Karli could most certainly do that in terms of going back on the LinkedIn post and just capturing it as a comment there. So at least they'll find it. And if there's anything that you want to share outside of that, any resource that you want to give them around your core pillars, by all means, you're most welcome to share it as well. This has been an enlightening and a refreshing conversation. Stay with us on the live. We'll see you again next week on Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. We'll end for now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.